In chapter 32 of Genesis, Jacob is already running from Laban. He has had conflict between his home and had to leave, and his mother and father were in conflict, and brothers, and everyone was in conflict. He runs to Laban, causes conflict there, is bringing his daughter, his wives, and sons and daughters with him. His daughter Rachel his wife Rachel had stolen her father's idols, which shows not only is Jacob not faithful and not a good person in other ways, he's also not a true follower of God or of Yahweh, the true God. As Jacob begins to approach Esau, he realizes that Esau is still likely to want his blood. So he takes his tremendous wealth, which he's acquired when living with Laban, and understand that God still blessed him, not necessarily because of his goodness, and not necessarily to really help Jacob, but because Jacob's line was going to be God's people. God was working for his generations. Well, as Jacob is about to meet with Esau, he takes a group of his livestock, 10 donkeys and 20 female donkeys and 10 bulls and 40 cows and so forth, and sends them as a gift to his brother. That night, when he's about to face Esau, there is a story in Genesis chapter 32 where Jacob wrestles with God. He's described, the person he wrestles with is described as an angel, but also as God. Jacob wrestles with him. This image here of Jacob, a fighter. Jacob never getting along with anybody, and here it tells you the story of how Jacob is conflicting with God himself. Okay? Now, don't think of this as in any way simply a physical story. This is a story of a physical event, but more of it is the understanding of Jacob wrestling or striving against, refusing to yield to God. And that's been Jacob's problem so far throughout his life. Jacob is then given by God the name Israel, which means struggles with God. Think about that for a second. The word Israel, the name Israel, the country Israel, struggles against God. It's an interesting thing because that's their language. That is, in Hebrew, that's what it means. He struggles against or with God. Now, in that same chapter, Jacob says, he calls the place Peniel. It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. The story itself may seem like Jacob overpowered God in that wrestling. Jacob understands that his life was spared by God, and not that he had conquered God. Okay, Jacob meets Esau, and when he does, he had already sent bribes, and that one bribe was followed by another bribe, and so forth. And when he faces him, he divides his family up into two groups in case Esau kills one whole group. That's the kind of fear Jacob had. Understand, this is a conflict-laden life that Jacob, grabbing for it all, created in himself. He didn't have to have this hatred toward Esau. They could have been buddies. He didn't have to have this conflict with Laban there, where he's running for his life. He could have been friends. It's his choices, his selfishness, that has brought him there. In chapter 34, in this polygamous setting, one of the daughters that was born was named Dinah. Dinah was raped by a person who was a powerful person in a village that they were living nearby. His sons, without his permission, murdered not just that man, but the whole town. And again, here is conflict, here is more struggle, right and wrong. The reality is that when a rape takes place, God lays down the law and it should be an execution. There should be justice. But when you do not do justice, the boys took the matter into their own hand, and it went beyond just the one person who had done wrong. It went to all. Jacob really had no good sense of right and wrong. In chapter 35, God said to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar to God." Now this is the first time Jacob's really going back to the land that God had originally intended for him for. He goes on and he says, "Get rid of the foreign gods you have here with you." So again, Jacob was following foreign gods. "Purify yourself and change your clothes. Then come, let us go to Bethel, where I will build an altar of God." And so here is the first time, here's the repentance, here's the returning to the place where God had first called the people. And God says to him, "I am a mighty God. Be fruitful and increase in numbers and multiply. And a nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will come from your body. The land that I gave Abraham and Isaac I give also to you. I will give this land to your descendants after you." Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked. Jacob set up an altar, a pillar in the place where God had talked with him. This is the first time Jacob is doing right. This is the only time we really see Jacob doing right. Now, out of Jacob comes the 12 tribes of Israel. Out of Jacob, who is named Israel by God because of his struggling with God or against God, this struggle produces 12 kids. Now these 12 kids are the 12 tribes. 6 are the sons of Leah. 2 are the sons of Rachel. 2 are the sons of Rachel's maidservant Bilhah, and 2 from Leah's maidservant Zilpah. And so those are the descendants of Jacob. That's the root or the origin of the nation of Israel. Esau's descendants are also listed. They're listed in chapter 36. We're about to enter 37. This week's study is chapter 37 to the end of Genesis, and it is a wonderful story named Joseph. Joseph is one of the true people of faith. You'll learn not how to follow God from the bad example like we did in Jacob. We learn instead how to live righteously from Joseph's example. I'm thankful to be getting to Joseph because Joseph's an inspiring story of faithfulness in spite of some unfair treatment, but remaining faithful to God. Next Sunday, well, hopefully we won't have snow. I'll see you then.